Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Shred the Veil. I'm very excited to have our guest here with us today, Tony Rodrigues, author of Ceres Colony Cavalier. His book recounting his story for when he went through the 20 and back program, and he spent some time off planet and had quite an adventure. So we're gonna dive into some of that and talk about him. But Derek, you recently met Tony at the recent conference out in Orlando. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, just briefly, the fact that I got to meet Tony at it's the Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference. It was a huge event. I mean, more so than I think people are going to realize, and Tony can speak to that. But Tony, I was just saying what an honor it was to meet him, and what a generous person he is, just to take the time to meet with the people there that have come to see all the speakers. He's like, he might not want me to say this, but he's going to be like the next Alex Collier, because he really gets down there and likes to, interact with the people and really just show how selfless he is to be in that environment. And really, he exuberates that love also that Alex was very good at doing, and he gives the best hugs, is what everybody says. So, so Tony, thanks so much for being here, and yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about that conference then.
Thanks. I never realized I never realized that hugging everybody the way that I did was going to be, get talked about as much as it does. People are always like, they're even renaming it a Rodrigues. I need a Rodrigues hug, And I was like, to me, it's not a way of life. I don't leave the house every day and have people that understand my story and that really just give me support. Like, I don't walk out the door and get recognized for talking on YouTube or doing any of this or my book. It has happened once or twice in the town, but for the most part, you know what I mean? Like, I live a pretty normal life where nobody really cares if I'm standing in line next to them or not. And so when we go to these conferences, it's a gathering of people that are all aware of the information. Right. And people are all there. So when I'm standing in line, they go, Tony, I read your book. I've seen your thing, thank you. And they're very supportive and very loving. And I feel so flattered and that I just transition. And I don't know. I've been asking friends, like, what do you say when somebody's really honoring you? Like you don't see it on TV a lot. You don't see it. It doesn't happen a lot. It just doesn't happen. And it's like we don't have a lot of really good words to say other than thank you. And, just to be because I'm at a loss for work. When people come up and go, Tony, I read your story and I just love you and keep up the good work. And this, they're saying all these things and I'm like, don't hear every day. So I'm at a loss for words and I transition straight to a hug because that's a form of communication too. So, and then, and I'm kind of basking it, you know what I mean? Like, I know it's not going to be forever that I'm going to be in an area where everybody's happy to see me. So I wanted to stay. I didn't want Saturday night to end at the conference. And what a magnificent conference it is. And I will never be another Alex. I'll be Tony, but Alex is in a class all his own. Alex is an active contactee via technology with ETs, and the closest thing we have is Elena. And so she's taken the mantle in that regard, and I'm kind of like, my testimony overlaps with both of theirs with their testimonies. It's supporting information, and it's important that people see different facets of it. So mine was traumatic. There are other people, Chris O'Connor, Jean Charles Moyen, that have other pieces of the puzzle. And what we found since the conference is that there's a great deal of overlap between our testimonies. So I was shocked by that. I was very shocked. Not really. I wasn't super shocked, but I was shocked at how easy it was to come out, you know what I mean, for us to prove things. And especially in the case of John Charles Moyen, after the conference, after meeting somebody in person is a different animal than, than being on the internet. So there was a lot of dots that got connected, and I think the entire community of the SSP community, the truther community, and ufology in general after that conference is going through a growth spurt right now, because it generated buzz for people to go home and talk about, and so it's getting on, and there's been a big growth spurt. There's a lot of activity, and it's absolutely healthy for the world for that to happen. So Sorry, don't let me talk. Don't let me talk all day.
No, it's
That's great.
exciting. It's really exciting that we're in this time now. We get to see this finally happen, and that it's really going to come forward a lot more in the to a lot of people that have been asleep to it for their whole lives. So that's awesome.
That's right. When I think about sometimes I to go from my normal life and then do an interview and transition to back to presenting the information of what happened to me when I was 10 and live
Right.
that and what is a slice of reality that people are unaware of. And to transition back into that, I almost feel, like a sinking feeling sometimes because it means that there's a lot of things in the world that are not right with the way that everybody believes. And so that's the whole point is we're trying to get the information out there to where it's to enough people to where they can disclose and we can just get on with it. And because they're giving us, because the guys at the top on the mainstream media, which is for the most part untrustworthy, they are even starting to give us signs of disclosure as well. So it's coming from the top. It's coming from like they can't hold. There's only so many fingers you can put in the dam before it's going to bust. And disclosure is coming whether they like it or not. Whether the powers that be like it or not, it's coming because of us, because of you guys, and what we're doing here today. Because we have the ability to share information that's not tapped by the media to be shared. It's like we're sharing. There's free flow of information through shows like this, and so it's just slowly growing. But like I said, the conference in Orlando was a big growth spurt, and you can see it. And my life got changed in ways that I didn't expect, and I've been to a few and signed up for a few more. I'm hoping to do 5 or 6 conferences this year. And they are
Wow.
planning a Galactic Spiritual Informers 2. It's in the planning right now. So good
Nice.
things. Like I said, it's growth. It's in well-needed growth.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
cool.
Very
Yeah.
good. I don't know how we want to. I want you to talk about some of the other topics. I heard you're going to start maybe work with some of the people from that conference as well. I mean, I think it's great that you guys are starting to put your energy and your talents to use. I mean, in a way, a lot of, and especially, I'll just say it because you did an interview, I guess, and talked about Sherry Dividend. I believe her last name is.
Yep.
Yeah, and she is all about the children and has her own foundation, the Artemis, I believe, the Artemis Foundation. And I mean, it's amazing what she's doing. I think that speaks volumes that you resonate with that and you want to go there and find solutions in that aspect because that's our future. The children are in the future for sure.
It's a silver bullet. So I didn't realize this, and I've never thought about this. Really, I've never thought about it because I've raised 3 girls in my life. My youngest one is about to go to college, and the kids are out back to being a free man, kind of, but,
Right.
in a way. But I never realized that as a parent, you outsource it. You just go, we move to a neighborhood that's got a good school in it and forget about it. Forget about school. And the teacher will call me if there's a problem. And you just let the kid go. And then you take, your tax dollars at work. So it's like a free daycare and you just right over your head. But if you're paying attention, the trend is alarming at the quality of education. It's going down over time. Even when I was a kid and when my parents were kids, the quality of the education, even though seemingly there's more information and it should be much easier, more technology, it should be much easier to teach the kids a quality education in 12 years, 13 plus years throughout their life of the best of their most learning years. They should have a very quality, they should come out much smarter than we did when we went through school. And it's the opposite. It's seemingly the opposite where they did that. So the trend is going down. And if it keeps going like this and nothing happens in the next 50 years, it's not going to be an education at all. It's going to be hardly anything. They're going to read and write and they're going to hate freedom. And that's about it. And they're going to do what they're told. That's really what's going on. So fast forward, I did a conference before the Orlando conference, which was an amazing concept. It was in Silicon Valley, and the premise was centered around people that were witnesses of the secret space program or contactees that had witnessed advanced technology and had tried to present the technology that they witnessed to developers. And And so the beautiful concept, it's the first of its kind. It won't be the last. I guarantee it, because it's so necessary. So I witnessed advanced technology. I don't know how it works, but if somebody that's developing something can get a shred of info, a shortcut out of me, this is super valuable. So I went there, and while I was up there, I was basically slave labor. It was like being in a jail and doing slave labor. So I was really not in the know of a lot of things. There was water cooler talk for me, but I really wasn't in the know. That being said, so when I got invited to this conference, I started making a list of things that I could present to a developer in my slideshow. And came up with 5 or 6 things. We'll talk about antigrav. There's actually a lot of great work being done for solving gravity physics, and they're actually quite advanced right now. There's a lab in Massachusetts that I've been working with in Jersey, that I've been working with on what I witnessed, and they made a mock-up. I don't know. I haven't talked to them in a couple of weeks, but I don't know if they were welding the mock-up together, and they funded and did all that. There's a group of guys, and they're actually quite far. They have successfully manipulated gravity with electromagnetic with like a high voltage. But so anyhow, they worked on that, and that was one of the things. But the other thing, the other technology, there was auto welding technology, there was communication technology, loading technology, and really the big advancement is gravity manipulation. So that leads to many different efficient ways of free energy. So when you can make something heavier on one side and lighter on the other, you can get an effect that creates a lot of energy. So that's the cornerstone of that. There were a lot of versions of that. So, but I don't know how it works, and I'm not a chemist. So,
But present it to the right people, and they can conceptually back engineer kind of, you're giving them the ideas, and
a bit of a shortcut. If it's a year, if it's a month of a shortcut, it's a shortcut, right? So that's my witness. But the thing that I did use quite a bit was I was trained. So they didn't put me in a school with a guy with a blackboard and a notepad, and then hand out pieces of paper for me to regurgitate and work the problem over and over again and learn engineering.
Right.
They did not do that. They had a completely separate system that was headed by ETs. And move this and lagging a little bit. It was headed by, there was always an ET that was basically the teacher of the class, and it was an automated system that they plugged you into. And there were several methods that they did throughout the system. And it's something that is not very complicated that can be back engineered. I remember when I got back, so I was in 4th grade when I was taken, and it was the end of the year, it was like April. So there was only a month of school left, and I finished with great grades. But the following year, when I started going through our school system, I didn't know why, because the memories were erased, but I thought, this is not the way to learn. And I withdrew because it was too much work. I thought, this is a waste of my time. Why am I doing this? And I totally withdrew from school because I knew that other system was out there. It's a lot less effort, and it's a lot more faster to retain the information. So this is something that I presented on Saturday, and I had met Sherry in person. Hello, nice to meet you. But I had no idea what her project was and what she was doing or anything about Aramis. And I sat in on her talk on Sunday, and I was blown away that she's literally kind of down the road at what I was talking about, because I was on stage and I said, look, the education, for the love of God, we just need somebody to get behind this, and we can develop a system that's way faster and ease the burden of the education system. So fast forward Monday, I met people that were willing to invest, and the guy that I met there that a subscriber to my Patreon channel was like, look, I live in Orlando, and I'll give you a ride from the airport. And I was like, cool. And it'd be nice to meet you. Somebody that I talked to in Zooms that I never really met face to face for a couple months.
Yeah.
And so he picked me up, but he's a software developer. He's got a software company. So a lot of components fell together, and we've been working on it. We're actually in the mock-up stage of the software now. This weekend, the flow chart and the software is being made, and the first mock-up. So we're gonna adapt one curriculum and try what I remember. We're putting together what I remember going through, the system that I remember going through, that I learned how to do ship maintenance and cargo engineering when they retrained me. They would give me tests, and that system, how I remember it, is pretty simple, but it's just a rule set of how they present data, and then you get tested. You don't even know you're being tested. It's really effortless. And so we're hoping that we're gonna do a mock-up. We're gonna do a couple tests. Sherry, we're working with Sherry, and we're hope to run it on a couple kids and get some data points, and then go to the next round of investors and try to adapt this. Because with her method, which is amazing for kids, it doesn't stunt children's natural growth of what they're good at, what they're interested in. Right. This method can supplement some of the burden of just getting the basics in. So when you talk about very young kids, of course you want them to sit and do art. You want them to learn dancing and the connection with animals and nature. You want all those things, but they still have to learn how to read. They still have to learn basic math. So this system would be much quicker than them being in a classroom situation and burdening all. And there's no paper. There's it's not the archaic old ancient 1800s education system. So we're working on that. I've got, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to, it's still in the development stage, but this is something that was birthed from the Orlando conference. And it's it has a, I can't talk it up yet because I really, this is just a concept and I'm going for it. So I don't have a lot of data to brag about with it. Who knows, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm going for it. We are going to go for this. And this is something that came together at the conference. And I think it has a great possibility. The other thing I was saying earlier about a silver bullet is that when you look at the crooked politicians and the finance and the corporate world, and you look at all the things that you can sit and everybody points a finger, they're bad and they're bad and they're screwing the world up and they're screwing the world up and they're screwing the world up. Yeah. All you have to do is train the kids. That's the silver bullet. That's the one common denominator, and let the next generation fight. Like don't have I'm a middle class guy. Yeah. And I'm older. I'm not going to go and take up the mantle and raise an army and change education. So, or fight the system. We just don't have that. Nobody does. Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is to train the kids to become the new system by giving them a new curriculum, a new version of things to learn, teaching them to be good people, blending in the spirituality with the education, which has been sorely lacking.
Yes.
So
exactly.
And by spirituality, I mean just being connected to that everything is kind of like one life, that all of life, is one organism and deserves respect rather than be plundered on one end, because that's what the elites are really doing right now. Is they're, they see themselves as separate than everything else, and they plunder it. And they realize there's a symbiosis, so they only have us just do well enough to where they can plunder more. But the way to beat them at the game is to train the next generation to understand what's going on. So taking over the curriculum and writing it is big. Sorry, and now I'm talking forever.
No,
that's really exciting. I'm glad you shared that. That's going to be amazing. Yeah. I really hope that goes through. Yeah.
Me too. I got my fingers crossed, guys. So everybody, you know what? Deep in my heart, I know it's going to work. That's the thing. Is I know it works.
It's coming from the right place. Yeah, exactly. Too.
Yeah, it's a form of reverse engineering alien technology. I'd say this is one thing. Here's a tidbit. That may or may not be worth it. But while we were developing it, we were thinking of, because there was like a frame. So imagine a computer screen, and then there was a frame and a place to set your chin. I had to sit down on a chair, and I kind of put my hands on a bar, and I had to sit and like that. And then it did eyeball tracking, which is totally doable now. We don't know if we need to. But I always wondered why the cage was around it. And then it had speakers that were right here, so you could hear, what was going on. That was the whole system. Yeah. And we were sitting here when we were developing, we're talking in a meeting. We're going, do we need to mock up the cage? And I'm thinking, what difference does that make? And logically, we're sitting, we're kind of racking our brain, like, is that really a component that is necessary out of this system to learn with? Do you need to be held still in a cage like that? And then we thought about it, and I said, you know what? It was probably because it was for them. Because they were skinny with big heads. So I bet they would get neck injury if they stayed still for a long time. Like they had to put somewhere to rest their heads because they were a different species.
I see.
Because the education system came from a different species. And so because they have big heads and skinny necks, they're used to lower gravity. They needed a cage somewhere to put their head to rest while they were studying. Think about that. So we were like, when I said that, it dawned on me. in a meeting, and we both went,
Wow.
wow, I never realized that. I didn't know. I just, you know what I mean? Like I was participating in an ET education system.
Yeah, it's
And
probably
so I had
commonplace for them. Yeah, they probably have that all the time wherever they're learning something or doing something. Yeah.
yeah, they have to park their heads somewhere because they got bigger. Their heads are proportionally much bigger than the size of their neck, like us. We're built a little sturdier. And
Right.
so I remember saying, I don't even need this thing. I remember saying that I don't need this thing. And they were like, get in there. You got to do it. And
So it'd be
so,
like VR goggles or whatever, if you want to use it that way.
right. Well, it wasn't a VR thing. Like I said, it looked like the school that I was in, and this was on Mars.
Yeah.
Actually, it was on Mars where I did most of the training, but it looked like a computer lab in a college. It did.
Mhm.
It looked like it was a big room with a tall ceiling, and he had his desk, and the lights were dim. There was a little lamp that came on over your desk. It wasn't full, and when you showed up, there was a lamp, and you'd go sit down, and he'd come over and plug you in, make sure you were sitting there. And then the light would go out, and the lesson would begin, and you sat there until you passed. It was that simple. It like I said, it doesn't test you all at once. It tests you as you go. And if
Mhm.
as you fail, it just repeats it, it just recycles it. So I don't want to give away a ton, because
Right.
I'm trying to get a patent around it. And
Makes
there's a lot
sense.
of other things. There's a lot of support. I'll put it this way: for this project that I'm working on, I've got a lot of support in my back pocket about it. There's a lot of support already. So that's
Perfect.
why I feel like it's time. I think this is could be a big thing.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's a great,
And
great concept.
and just I was gonna say, just so people don't get confused, because you were put through a lot of traumatic, I mean, so many traumatic things in your earlier childhood, and that was a lot of the MK Ultra stuff that happened in Inyo occurring in California, I guess. And I just want people to make sure they distinguish between that experience and, of course, later on, like sort of this, basic kind of
So
education. Yeah.
this form of education. So the Inyokern one was also a place where we were immobilized and forced, but we were drugged heavily during
Mhm.
that, and it was trauma based. So they actually caused pain for
Yeah.
us, and they would torture us and then put us back and make us watch the movie. And they were not instructional. They were further trauma. Like it was cartoons blended with like horror, gore. But this system. So the other thing is I talk about this system is not a hypnosis. It is not so. It's not a version of it. You're not hypnotizing your kids. There's no drugs involved.
Yeah.
We may recommend a diet plan. There may be obviously there's a lot of data that shows that kids that are if you restrict their sugar, that they can learn faster, that
Yeah.
that they do better in school with unrestricted sugar diet. So we may recommend something like that, but
Sure.
it's no hypnosis, and it's not hypnosis, and it's not drugs. So
Yeah.
it's literally just a different way of presenting data. So it's very simple to do. There's a rule set to how a flow chart of how the data works, that you can absorb it quicker. And there's a lot of versions of it out now
Yeah.
already. There's a lot of theoretical things, and we're seeing apps like learning apps that are close. It's the
Okay.
same concept, but they're close, but not as good. Well, it's not the same as what I'm developing. So there's already a market for it. There's already a market out there for it. So I'm
Wow.
see. I'll keep you guys posted. I'm gonna keep. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm a blabbermouth, so I can't keep a secret for the life of me, especially when I'm on an interview. So I will update people as it goes. If it works, it works. I'll tell you guys. If it don't work, I'll tell you what happened. So
Yeah.
it's
That's
gonna work.
great.
It's gonna work.
I have a
Yeah.
6-year-old. I'd gladly have him test it out for you. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. The other thing is, so researching this, when I start, so the first thing I need is the curriculum to adapt. So I need the official
Mhm.
school curriculum, which is, if I'm going to go for kids that can be stamped and say that they've completed K through 12 kind of thing, if I'm going to adapt the system to that, then I need the curriculum. And I
Yeah.
started looking, and it's really a mess. It's really a mess to go in and do and acquire a curriculum. So I'm starting with an astronomy class.
Oh,
But what I found is that it's a mess. That what is existing already for the kids, like from the teacher's perspective,
oh yeah.
that there is a standard kind of curriculum, but there's really not. It's really not as it's not as good as I had assumed it would be. The
Wow.
system for the what the you think that there's that any human being that goes through K through 12, that there's a list of things that they need to know to be graduated. They're like the GED test.
Yeah.
And when you look on the curriculum end of it, it's not organized one bit. It's just not. And from what I'm finding so far. So that's kind of so far going to be the challenge of how it goes. But it's still very early. I need to shut up. I know that guys in the company that I'm working with would want me to shut the hell up right now.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, it's so great. I hope you, take advantage of it. It's for the right reasons, for the right purpose. And I mean, after all you've gone through, I would hope you get rewarded for helping,
Well, it would be a great honor to make kids' lives a little easier. And you know what I mean? School is soul crushing. Let's face it. They teach you to divert from your soul's purpose in the system. They do. It really does that. So it does give you education, but for the most part, it's a giant waste of time.
And it's taking your soul out of you. You're taking all the spirit away from you, all that life.
All the creativity, the most creative years for people is wasted on repeating multiplication and learning history that doesn't really affect them versus history that should.
Yeah.
And so it's just there's a giant waste of time. There's a waste of very prime years for somebody. Like your developmental years, from 10 to 20 are huge. Those are big years for somebody. That's a big opportunity. And we're seeing it get wasted. So it would be an honor for the system to work. And I look at it like this, like if I drop dead, I've already set the ball in motion. Like if I choke on a chicken bone today, knock on wood, if I went and choked on a chicken bone, I've already set the ball in motion. Like it's already out there. It's already in there. I think there are people that could run with it, but I do want to stay with it as long as I can and make a life out of it. Maybe it's what I do full time. We'll see.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Totally.
Should we get into the story? A little background. I mean, I don't want to dwell in everything because it's a lot. And like you said in the past interviews, you said, I wrote a book about it, so I don't have to go through, relive it again. So I get it. So I don't want to have to make you go through any of that. It's very traumatic. It's a lot. I mean, when people realize the last 100 years of how we even as a civilization started our spacefaring, our advancements into space and travel, it wasn't based on like kumbaya, everybody's at one and we're gonna do this together as Star Trek. It was literally through a slave race and slave labor, right, to do this, mainly German, Nazi, ex-Nazis, and everything else.
So I think a lot of people don't really understand. I think a lot of people, when they look at the secret space program, look at the secrecy behind the entire extraterrestrial phenomenon, right? I'm throwing big blankets at it.
Yeah.
When they look at it, they don't really get into the psyche of the people that own everything. The royalty, the crown owns a great deal of everything. There is a society of people that are very powerful as far as assets, and that they get through their family. There are families that pass giant assets, and these are the giant corporations. These are the giant landowners. These are the people that control our resources. These are governments, but these are the people that control the government above that. So there's a society. They've been all through history, and they've passed down their generational wealth, and so their mindset is much different than yours and mine, because we're the common people. We're common, so we just want to kind of get along and find a passion and chase it. You know what I mean? It's that simple. You want to get. That's really, we just want to be happy. We're not really concerned with control. And because they've had control for so long, when the extraterrestrial contact was viable, and when I say that, I mean when the ability to fly up there and not just pay attention to what's coming down, but actually go up. I always say World War I was about money. World War II was about interstellar flight. And so right in the beginnings of World War II, like the Deutsch, the German secret government branches got into space. They developed anti-grav technology, and the other governments needed it, and we had World War II.
Yeah.
Since then, many governments have gone into space, but they've done it for themselves. That's the mindset of the people that are in control, is to maintain the advantage, and so they've kept it secret. Yeah. And ETs are in control of them, for their own reasons, for plundering resources. Like they're dealing with ETs, and it's easier to use our resources out from under us. That's what my book details, is an account of being exposed to this under secret. I don't call it secret society, and kind of, I don't want to stitch it to some other term, but this secret reality of the world I was taken into and exposed. And the thing that was unique about me, because it happens to thousands of people and could be happening to people as we speak, but the thing that's unique about me is I got my memories back for whatever reason, for one reason or another, and so I remember it. So that's the basis of my book. If anybody watching, so if you're on,
for people who don't know the story, just very high level, you were taken as a child by these people from this secret group, and at first it was pretty dark. It was like sex slavery and different things in Peru and Seattle, and then you went on to the moon and Mars, and then Ceres, where you were there for quite a while as a slave, really. And it was in like a German corporation that you were working for.
Organized as corporations. That's right. Corporation, colony corporations, Mars Colony Corp, Ceres Colony Corp.
And then after 20 years, the program is such that they blank slate you, bring you back, regress your age back to where you left off as a child, and you're back in society now, and having a normal life until you remember all this stuff, right?
And to be fair, it wasn't normal. Like my life diverted for the worse after that. Like I brought back a lot of emotional baggage. So I would not understand. People always, I don't want to say always, but I get it quite a bit. I get it quite a lot of comments that people go, "Man, I read your book. I saw you on YouTube, but how do you keep it after all you went through? How are you so sane?" And the answer is that I was very emotionally damaged, and I was very unstable through most of my life. The years that it happened after the abduction, like I wasn't all there, and I was very damaged. So it was a long heal. Like it happened literally 40 years ago. So I had that much time to process and kind of grow beyond the trauma from it. So that's why.
And how did the memories start to come back? That's kind of one thing. It's because you said you had retained them, or somehow. How is that?
Right. So when you really think about it, that it would suggest that memories are not 100% stored in the body, that there's somewhere else that I'm accessing memories from. But I had the memories, though, they would bleed through. So I had the big events of when I was out there, what I still remembered, but they were like right in the morning before I'd wake up dreaming. And it was a memory. It wasn't a dream. It was because I could remember it through the rest of the day, and I could remember more or less of it. And it just didn't make sense. I was like, and that's weird, because I was like 20 years old and I was standing on a spaceship, and I was like, but I remember the walking in the hallway, the umbilical, to get to this. I was like, that's not a dream. It's not a dream. So it just didn't make sense.
Like almost more detail, more like, because in dreams you can't like read or you can't memorize certain things, right? So
well, there was a before and after. Like this is my example. I say, well, you've all of a sudden you're in a dream and you're walking on a beach, right? And you go, oh, I'm dreaming. And even if you become lucid in the dream, you go, oh, this must be a dream. This is a beautiful beach. How'd I get here? If you stop to think of how you got there, and then when you wake up in the morning and you think, how did I get to that beach? There's nothing. There's no memory of that, because you literally did not travel to the beach. You just started dreaming it. These were different. These were like, it was in the time that I was dreaming. But when I woke up and I thought about how I got there, I had the memory of walking across the umbilical, riding a train. I could trace it back. I had before and after of the day. And I thought, when could that have happened? And it was me. Like I looked in the mirror, I was the same person. I was me. And so I just blew them off. I had bits and pieces of memories that were very emotionally what do you call it? Very emotionally charged memories, very dense, very like spikes. The spikes of emotion are the memories that bled through, that I kept getting those. So, and then I had the big memory event in May of 2015. I had an MRI, and all those memories that I thought didn't make sense when I was remembering them, I thought, when could that have happened? Because I've been 20 in Michigan the whole time.
Yeah.
So I had memory, I had an overlap line. So I thought, man, it's just whatever. And I just went on with my life. And everybody does this. I think I said this before, that we all witness something a little bit
Yes. Yes.
orthodox. Everybody has some kind of psychic intuition when they went left or right, or they see something they shouldn't see, and you just go, well, maybe I got lucky, and you go on about your life. You ignore the probability that was totally impossible. So I did that, and then when I learned, I saw that I got coincidentally got an MRI, and 2 weeks later I saw the Randy Kramer interview on Exopolitics, and he explained the technology that they take people for 20 years. And I always remembered being taken. Yeah. And I thought they put me right back. And I thought maybe they took me again later. I had other memories. I thought maybe in my 20s they came and got me again. I just don't remember being taken. Yeah. And maybe I was taken several times because I kept having these memories. And when he said that they take you for 20 years and then age regress you and put you back in your body, I went, oh my God, that's what happened. And and then once that happened, the memories came. Big chunks and years of memories at a time. It was an overwhelming experience. It was very overwhelming.
That was the trigger to put it all together for you, just like massive downloads of.
I accepted it. Once I accepted, I went, oh, then that happened. And I went, then that happened. And then I was freaked out because of the amount of memories, because it was decades. And when I started to put them together, again, the first day or so, I thought, there's no way that I could prove this, or what do I do with this, and I thought, whatever. And then I looked on Google Earth and I started finding places that I remembered in that time that I've never been. So I would say to anybody that's skeptical watching this, that the experience that I went through was all of a sudden remembering living someplace for 2-3 years at a time, that you've never heard about on the news. I mean, there's little towns all over the world that people know nothing about. Right. So imagine a little town somewhere in a state that you've never been to, and then remembering living there, and then looking on the map and finding the house and finding the street that, you know what I mean, the little cul-de-sac and the pine forest that's right next to it. And it's first remembering it all and then discovering that it's true. That's what I went through for months. And then when I looked at Peru, the mountain, oh my God, I remember the fishing. I went fishing right there. I remember going here. There's my little shack. There's on my walk. There's my route back. I kept finding things. And at that point, I reached out. I was like, man, I can't take this to the grave with me. I need to reach out to people, and I need to tell this, I thought I need to share this because there's just too much here.
That's important. I was about to say the evidence that you started to come out with eventually, that you were finding over time, and the one that's to kind of prove that you even went off planet. I think there's one you talked about where you knew that salt deposits or something on Ceres, right? So
when there's a geyser on Ceres, and when it went off, that was one of the very profound memories, very happy moment to, in the middle of my day-to-day boring, mundane life as labor. Then they gave us 15-minute break, and you could leave your post and go to the observation deck, and they were doing a flyby of the geyser in the Okata crater. And so that conversation, and then the deck was crowded. So the big window that went from the ceiling to the floor, there was a big observation window. I tried to get up close to it, and it was just too crowded. You couldn't even see. There was too many people. So I went to the back of the hallway down on the C deck hallway, and there were big oval windows. And I found a window I had all to myself, and there was an officer there. And, I don't want to say he was rude, but he's kind of a dick. And but if I'm being perfectly honest, but I said I tried to make conversation with him. We're flying over this, and you see the geyser went up about 9 or 10 kilometers high. Wow. And the Okata crater is like 54 miles wide. It's big. And so they looked like mountains. It was mountainous when, it's like we were flying pretty low. We were flying like maybe 5,000 feet high over it. So, and pretty slowly. And it would shoot up, and then the water would evaporate. It was a gas. At the top, it was like at the bottom, you could see the water coming out, but at the top, it was just gaseous. Yeah. And then where the gas evaporated at the top, the salt was coming out and snowing back down at different speeds. So it was faster on the outside and slower on the inside. Like
Wow.
it was beautiful. It was absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Mm.
And I said, when we got close, and you could look down and see the salt deposits over millennia of this happening. I mean, it's meters thick. It's a lot of salt.
Yeah.
And I said to the guy next to me, I said, I don't know what that is, but it seems like we could go down there and use it and trade it for. It seems like it'd be something valuable. Can we use that? And he said, rudely, he said, you can go down there without a helmet on and scoop it up and maybe bring it back and take a nice bath. He's like, what are we going to do with that? He's like, it's just salt. He's like, there's some magnesium, there's some salt in there. It's like, the only thing you can do with it is take a nice bath. And so I always remembered that. That was a very
Yeah.
big moment for me, because it was like a one-on-one with a guy that never would talk to me, even though he's kind of slightly rude. But
Yeah.
there was that out of place, and then seeing it was beautiful. Fast forward into getting my memories back and researching my account. I said in 2015, when the Dawn probe, 2016, excuse me, when the Dawn probe got there, I got questioned. I said, no, that's salt. And the first time that the first high altitude orbit of the Dawn probe speculated that it was sulfur and a bunch of other, like a cocktail of minerals. And I said,
Yeah.
nope, that's salt. It's just salt in there. There's a slight amount of magnesium and salt. And it took them 4 years before they concluded, when they went to the lower orbit and then eventually shut the probe off. They concluded in August of 2020 that it was salt, and it came out. So I called that out. So a lot of people go, man, that's not evidence. I think there's a lot of people on YouTube that, like, in the comments, like the trolls, like, that's not evidence. And I'm thinking, yes, it is. You do that. You go ahead and you do that. You call something out before it gets analyzed on another planet, and give reasoning behind it, and then all the other story and support it with the other stories of how I knew my way around Seattle. There's quite a bit that happened in Seattle that people are unaware of, that proved my story to researchers as well. So people have reached out to me, investigators have reached out to me and donated time pro bono to research my story, and they don't come up with a silver bullet, but the little things that would prove me wrong keep checking out. And the people too. There are people involved that I don't talk about. There's actually quite a bit of evidence that supports me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, actually, I just heard something randomly. It was this guy talking about a lot of mainstream scientists are now saying that Ceres, this random asteroid in the asteroid belt, could be the next place where humans are able to colonize rather than Mars or the moon. And they came up with, they said people would have to be inside the asteroid because there's no atmosphere or anything, and they had all these intricate plans for the gravitation system that they would do and everything like that. But they're multiple scientists now are pointing out Ceres as a place that would be next. So
they're
I don't know.
aware that it's something like a quarter of it is what, a quarter of the mass of Ceres is water, and that's why they're excited about it. So there's a big, basically an ocean in there,
Wow.
which is why we were there, which is why they're already there. It was prime real estate. So
Yeah.
And so it was for you, it was a whole underground colony. Everything was subsurface that where you were at. Yeah.
that's right. So they had found an existing infrastructure. There was the inside the right next to the Alhana Mons, which they referred to it as the pyramid base.
Yeah.
There's a crater right next to it, so looks like a figure eight. But there's the Alhana Mons, like a cryovolcano, that NASA calls it. I don't know if there is a pyramid in there, it was classified, and I didn't know. But in the crater next to it was the entrance to the hangar. And they found those big doors that some other species had built the hangar and built those doors. That entire system was built by another species that had been abandoned. And so they moved in and began the Deutsch culture, the German culture post World War II were given that from the Orion group after making contact, and then moved in and began to build into it. And they're mining out holes and building cities and they're all connected by train all the way around the planet. They're connected by train.
So to that German company, that corporation, they kind of own the entire area, or is there other okay, yeah, it wasn't like
yes, they have it's Ceres Colony Corporation.
Okay.
Ceres Colony Gesellschaft, is what they called it.
Yeah.
But
there are other species that are alien races.
Yeah, there are other corporate entities there that are under them. So the Ceres Colony Corporation has the authority. When their police show up, they have the authority. When
Okay.
when you call the cops, it's Ceres Colony Police that show up, and they have absolute authority. It's like military, like totalitarian. Like the police can just shoot you, and
Wow.
nothing bad will happen to them.
Mhm.
They'll fill out a report. That's it. So it's a different society than what we think. It's
Oh, yeah.
it's a snippet. They went off from the 40s, the 30s and 40s, and I think
Mhm.
they've developed their human rights and things developed slower than the rest of the world's.
Okay.
For
But there were
sure.
other corporate entities that were in there working. So there was about 250,000 people there when I was there. That was the population that I was aware of. About 250,000.
Wow.
And what percentage was of that was the slave class like you were?
I was told the number that sticks out in my mind the most is about 40,000 slaves, about 40,000 total slaves. And I forget how many were in my barracks, my block where I was.
Mhm.
There were a few thousand guys. There was a big line to the shower in the morning. Like it was a big area that
Yeah.
had that where we lived.
So there's a couple things I wanted to ask because, well, you said there's a lot of water there, but I know even the Germans even had the replicators, and you even had eaten from like the old '60s style, like probably poorly one that had all the crappy food that you said you ate,
Mhm.
but they had the nice ones for the people that weren't slaves, I guess. So if you could replicate the food and everything, was water still very valuable? I guess that's one thing you needed to still find as a resource.
It was, but they didn't really care. They were the urban legend, because it was classified to us. The urban legend was that they were digging, they were mining, and they were looking for water, pockets of water, but not because they needed the water, because inside the pockets of water there was technology from an aquatic species that lived there. So there was a species that lived there that was aquatic, that had built buildings, advanced technology, and
Yeah.
had built inside these giant pockets of water that are the size of a giant lake,
Mhm.
and they would go in there. And so they wanted to find these pockets and then let the water out and go in there and look for root and then build in their own. And then what they did was, when they found a pocket, then all of a sudden they had space to go in and build their own infrastructure, because real estate was a big deal. Like there wasn't ever enough room for the storage. They were acquiring goods from trading with other species. They had nowhere to put it.
Wow.
So space was a big deal. And they wanted to maintain the outside of it so that they were undiscoverable. So
Right.
there was a law that there was nothing on the surface, like not even a stick with an eyeball kind of thing. There was nothing on the surface. No, what do you call it? Sensors or anything like that on the surface. There
Yeah.
was an area that had windows, like an atrium, like a very tall, like you're in a hallway, in a shopping mall kind of area, and then above it, it went up and you could see windows that were out, but there was a technology that hid it from the outside.
Mhm.
So the windows probably had the print of the dirt on it or something. But
Right.
there was a place that I remember that people would always go and say they could look up and see the stars.
I see.
So, but they were very careful. The law was that nothing could be built on the surface, because they didn't want somebody to just be riding by and go, "Oh, there's a colony here. Let's attack them and take all their stuff." So that was it was a security issue.
I see. So this leads into the next part, the fact that you worked on a German, old German submarine that was turned into a spaceship. This is really amazing because it corroborates what William Tompkins talked about from the secret space program coming from that time period. The Blitzbus is what you called it, right?
I call it, yeah, the lightning horse,
Yeah.
the lightning trucker. There was the lightning horse was how
Okay.
I believe that's what it translated to. Um, Interestingly, in the very beginning, there were other whistleblowers coming forward, and one of them that did not want anybody else to come forward behind them. And so all of my testimony that was getting corroborated against them got refuted. And so much so that I was, kind of excommunicated in the early years from the disclosure community.
Wow.
And now we find out later that this person did that about everybody all along, and has actually shot themselves in the foot quite a bit. So I won't name names. But the one thing that saved me, that kept me working with a researcher, was that I identified the submarines being converted into spaceships first. I was the first one that said that, and I said it privately, so not publicly. And then all of a sudden, so the researcher that I was working with got my testimony that I said, no, it was an old submarine. I mean, there were valves everywhere. There were the doors. I remember always hitting my shin on the doors. I hated it, and it was cramped. And I said they had converted a submarine into a spaceship, and it was and then after about 8 years of working on it, it got decommissioned because it just kept falling apart. So then other whistleblowers, namely William Tompkins, came out and said, yes, that's exactly what the Germans did in the beginning, and the Americans, is that because submarines were strong enough to be in a vacuum, their hull was of tolerance, it was easy to just convert rather than build a whole spaceship from scratch with the technology. So, and that was my very first shred of evidence. That was my very first tangible shred of evidence that supported me, that let the researchers keep working with me further. And then down the road, other things have panned out, like Inyokern in Seattle, the water, the salt. So sorry.
Amazing. And the one other interesting part about that, you said your day was very, very boring, same old thing every day, but that you would actually be time traveling as well when you went out and be like other star systems. You would actually be going through space to do some type of trade, I guess, but were you just always working on the ship to maintain it?
So on the submarine, on the Blitz bus, we were on the bottom deck, and we were the only ones down there. We were maintenance. So the crew was upstairs. They had their own deck upstairs, and we did not have any kind of interaction with. They would call down to us and tell us to do things. They could watch us and interact with us, but there was no window to look out. I spent my day, I had no idea if we were traveling or not. Really, I couldn't tell. You couldn't tell if it was moving. You could hear things come on during the day. So we kind of had an idea, maybe 50 minutes before we were going to be back, we could hear the purge. We called it the purge. There was a tank that had radioactive material and it would purge. And we were aware of that. And when it did, we were about an hour from home. So that's how we knew when we heard, there's the purge. There we go. And you could hear the noise of they shifted something, the engine. And when we heard that, we knew that we were about an hour and a half from being back in dock. And then all of a sudden, the light would come on by the door, and the door would open, and we could leave. And we would come back in the morning again. So we would have to go back to the barracks, and you could nap, but then you'd get put to work. We had to do laundry and clean lunch trays and stuff like that, sweep the floor. It's like you got put to work if you were in flight. The miners stayed gone all day.
Okay.
Okay.
So one thing about the time travel, I heard you describe in an interview where you got that they would go out on a mission and they would intentionally come back like 5 minutes before they initially left, so they could see if the mission was successful, if they actually were able to get back to Ceres or not.
Yes.
And if it wasn't, then they wouldn't do the mission, right?
They had a few minutes to scrub the mission, exactly. So we're getting a lot of people testimony right now talking about, the reality of the fabric of time. Everybody thinks that, like I was told then, and it's again, I don't want to butt heads with anybody, but what they told me was that there was one timeline. That's it. And so it doesn't break off. You don't change time and then everybody still exists on another timeline and then a new timeline exists too. That's not the case. There's one timeline, and when you change it, it changes. Period. So when we were out on the ship, it did happen, and we did ask this, what happened when they scrubbed it and you can see the ship? There were a couple of instances where the ship did come back, but it was in the wrong place. So the captain was aware of the coordinates every day of a secret place, so that only he could give the order to return the ship. So nobody else knew. The control tower knew, and the captain knew where the ship was going to land, basically, but as it came through a wormhole back. 5 minutes as the crow flies from the planet. So it was still not there yet, but they could see it. And then they knew if it was successful. And if it was in a different spot, they would cancel. They were like, no, like the ship got took over or boarded or something. A hostile force would have been on the ship. So the captain would just take it back to the wrong place, and they'd cancel. They'd anti-telephone the mission away.
Wow.
That happened a couple times, and they said that the ship immediately disappeared. As soon as they said scrub the mission, they had eyes on it, and it just disappeared. No effect, no special effect, no nothing. It just blinked away quickly. That's what they said happened.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was curious about that. That sounds crazy. Yeah.
I know. Well, and it sounds very useful if you
Yeah,
think
for
about it.
sure.
In a
Oh, yeah,
military situation, yeah, it sounds very useful.
absolutely. So with the time travel, I guess it doesn't sound like they tried to do this, but would it be possible to come back in time and talk to yourself or interact with the yourself before you went and did something, or is that was like they
Those
didn't?
are things that we talked about, that we said, that are, like we would always ask that, and we got the runaround on an answer. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like from the superiors. So like I said, I don't really know the answers of that.
yeah.
But my impression was that yes, my,
Mm.
like I don't, so I'm just speculating this,
Yeah, okay.
but my overall impression was that you could go back in time and meet yourself and talk to yourself, and it would be just fine. There was a condition, there was some kind of dangerous condition to it where it was dangerous. You could get stuck there, two of you, or
Mm,
something. I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm just speculating. But my impression was that it was possible, because now you're still in the timeline. Like you
yeah.
exist and you come back, now there's just two, like because the front hasn't happened yet. Time is a different, it's not another universe each time you change the timeline, that all of a sudden there's an infinite number of time. That's not what they believed. Like how they propose a lot of TV shows or whatever, they theory that there's an infinite a number of timelines, and that everything's happening at all times of every version of of what could happen. There may be something like that dimensionally, but timeline wise, that's not the case.
Mm,
Like that's what we were taught.
okay. Wow.
Interesting. Very interesting. Oh man. So Dan, I don't know. There's so many other little things that I've been reading the book. I'm actually like almost through with it, and I think it ties into a lot of the stories I've heard you talk about already. There was an interesting one. Well, let me ask you this one. This is another thing about evidence. You mentioned an 8-year-old young black boy that was almost like going through, like he was in the hospital, he had all these tubes in him, and he like reached out to you, or still, worker slave, and you didn't realize he was just coming up and wanted to like give you a hug, and something about me
So
again later, right?
in
Yeah.
what did I do? My first interview was September 2016. And I think it was later on. I could look at the emails, but and I don't want to say his name because he did want to come out and talk about it publicly, and he did an interview for like on a YouTube channel back then, and his family found out, and he went through a lot. He caught a lot of hell, and so he said, "Nope, take it down, and I don't want to talk about it. Don't mention my name." Because I was going to have him on my show. I was going to, you know what I mean? I was going to present him,
Yeah.
and but he said no, he doesn't want anybody. A lot of people have memories of, I'm just somebody that started talking about it publicly. I guess that's a person, maybe I needed the attention or something, I don't know, but a lot of people do have memories. They have no desire to speak about it, and
Mhm.
he's one of them. But I think it was like mid 2017, he messaged me on Facebook, and he goes, that was a dick move, man. I said, what? He said, what you did on the moon. I remember I was the one. I was the kid. And I ran up to you and you kicked me. And he's like, that was a dick move. He said, for years after that, I wanted to kill you. I hated you. I still hate you. I hate you. And I was
Wow.
like, wait a minute, man.
Wow.
Now what? And we had an email back and forth, and he told me his version of the story, which is slightly different, but he was a little kid, but
Mhm.
it was exactly what I remembered. So I had a scene in my head
Yeah.
of details that I remember, and then he had the scene from his version,
Yeah.
and he was accurate. So we talked. I talked to him for a couple years. He's gone about his life. He's a successful guy,
Yeah.
and he was taken because he had profound psychic ability, as did his mother and his grandmother. They were from the Caribbean, which
Oh
we
wow.
get a lot of psychic ability from genetic lineage in the Caribbean. So
Hmm.
his mom was from the Caribbean directly, I believe, and he had profound psychic ability and still does to this day. And he was taken into the programs, and then on the moon, in a deep in a classified, like not where the LOC, where the humans are working, but in
Mhm.
many levels down, that is very classified and off limits. He was down there being trained to be an assassin. Essentially, he said he was on missions to kill people, and he was taken when he was like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So 18 to 29, like, like, and he he said he was killing people. They would send him to different planets to go in and befriend people and kill them. And that's what he was doing. He had psychic abilities that would help him do that. And he said that he was being tortured. He was in the middle on the moon. He was in the middle of the trauma-based mind control programming, as well as psychic training. So on top of trauma, they were also teaching him psychic. He said that they were taking him. And I remember 2 grays, and he was kind of in a state of mind in a gown, in a medical gown. And I was with 2 guys that was on an away mission that I volunteered off of the Blitz bus. I was almost suicidal. I hated my life at that time. I was very, very not right in the head for those years. It was just, it was like a very lonely period in life. It was. And so these guys, these young kids that were officers, were filling my head. They're like, don't take anything from anybody. We're here from it's midnight hour. Midnight hour is here. We're the minute knocked off. He's like, we're on this base. They think they're better than us. They're not. He's like, you're one of us. You don't take shit from nobody here. Right. So they were like pumping me up, and it felt good. I ain't gonna lie. I finally, and I thought, okay, yeah. They were like, if anybody messes with, we're all gonna. He's like, we're all in the same. Even though you're a slave, we're all gonna kick their ass. They were young guys. They were like 20.
Yeah.
And I saw this kid, and we walked around the corner, and he looked at me, and he said, when he told me, he said, the rest of them were all dead to me, but you had colors. He was in a state of mind where he could see auras.
Okay.
He was seeing auras around people, and he said they were all gray and dead. Even the 2 robots that were with you, he called them robots. And he said they were dead, but you had color. And I wanted to hug you. I wanted to go to you because I knew that you were the only real person that I'd seen. And he ran to me screaming, ah, with his arms out, like, yay.
Yeah.
And I lifted my foot up and kicked him in his chest. And it was a reaction, and it was a terrible thing to do. And the Rays got him, and they resedated him and took him. And he said they put him in a room with a bunch of animal-like beings that they were psychically kind of attacked. Like he had to defend himself psychically. It was a dark room, and he drew pictures. They were like grotesque-looking beings that they put him in there. It was an exercise.
Wow.
And he had been drugged up. So that was strange to me, like that whole scene. So they took me, like I was like, am I going to get in trouble for kicking him? And they said no. Like there was a little bit of a scene there, but then I just went on about my way, and we did the Chicago mission that's in the book. The Chicago that happened after that was directly on the way to that mission.
My God, that was what I was going to bring up next, because that's an interesting encounter with a Draco reptilian, right?
With a reptilian, well, as best I can tell.
Yeah,
it was a lot like that. Yeah, as best I could tell, because it had a suit on that gave a gas out of it. When I saw it close, it was shooting gas out of the suit all over it, and then projecting an invisibility on that, so it was invisible. It was on, it was outside and on the rooftop of a building in Chicago.
Right. And you said you just saw the eye. The eye was just kind of peering, and the mind control.
Giant yellow eye. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And so the point of that mission, I mean, that goes back to, I guess, the fact that there was some agreement with those reptilians with that race, because they were somehow helping the ship. So he had anti-gravity to get back out, or because he crashed.
He had a unit. No, it wasn't a ship. It was his apartment on the building. So it was living on the top floor of one of the high rises in Chicago. Wow. And it had the ability to turn the gravity down in its room. So it was a gravity unit. It was an anti-gravity unit that was disguised as an air conditioning unit on top of the building. And just under it was where he was staying, probably had a nice place. And it was a lower gravity thing, and the unit malfunctioned, and we were there to fix it. And we were expendable just in case it ate one of us. So it was known, they're known to call a crew of people in and then kill one of them for themselves. Like they're a predatory species. Mm-hmm. And so that's why they used slave labor. They didn't send down professionals. They used us. And it was expendable. And in order, I volunteered. Mm-hmm. I was on a list to do missions like that I could possibly lose my life, because it was a shortcut to being promoted, and which I did get eventually promoted,
Yeah. But you were so ready to just die anyway, or get out of that life, right?
I was programmed to not commit suicide. Mm-hmm. And I was also suicidal. Like my life was so meaningless at that time that I just wanted to die and get it over with. There was no, I was looking at still doing that for 12 years or 10 years. Like I had 10 years to go. Yeah. Of extremely miserable existence. And the I spoke about this the other day, and I guess this is something that's kind of starting to come out, is that out of all of the things that I suffered that were bad, loneliness was the worst. And I mean a form of loneliness that not just somebody next to you, because you can be in a crowd of people and be lonely. You have to have somebody, the only thing that relieves loneliness is somebody that appreciates you, like a friend, somebody that likes you and wants you to be better and wants to learn from you. And like, that's what cures loneliness. And I was very lonely. There was nobody in my life. There was nobody that emotionally gave a shit about me. So I was 100% lonely. And after a few years of that, it was very, very painful to do. So I didn't care. So on that mission, I thought, please. And I was much less afraid than I should have been. Like, I should have been scared, but I wasn't. I was thinking, yeah, here we go. He's gonna set me free.
Yeah.
And I was not afraid of dying in that moment. And as a result, I was not appealing to him.
Right.
None of us were. So I think it enjoys the fear. I think on many, Elena Denon mentioned this to me, and I totally agree with it. Fear is consent. That, like a bully wants to punch somebody that's afraid of them. A bully doesn't fight people that are not afraid of them.
Right.
It's not about the fight. It's that fear is a form of consent. And I look back at my time up there and the times I was most afraid and the times I wasn't, and it mattered. Like when I look back on my whole life, really, I mean, everybody, I would say that to anybody. Look back on your life and the times when you didn't consent to bad things happening, but they happened. You were probably very afraid too. So fear, controlling that is a big deal.
Makes sense.
Yeah. When you say you eventually got promoted, what did that look like? Was it like a different level in society that kind of you
Absolutely
had more privileges, maybe? Or
yeah. Absolutely. I got promoted, and then a few months in after that, I was promoted to cargo engineer, and I was retrained. And that system of education was a blend of the system from Mars and from old school. Like there was a teacher, and we had little pads, and there was a readout, like there was a good old fashioned blackboard on the screen that in the room that he had our lessons. And really all he wrote on the blackboard was log in here's your login and here's this, and then your lesson begins on the pad. We had little pads, but that's what the blackboard was used for. And he took down notes, like be here tomorrow at 9 at this time. And he put that on the blackboard. Yeah. But it was a different education system, but kind of a blend between the two. And I got retrained for cargo, and basically I just did data input. I didn't really move. There were about 7 guys in my cargo bay that moved things. They had equipment to move the boxes. And then I went down and measured them and weighed the boxes and entered the data into the computer, and it spit out a report on where to stack them, like a schedule, a stacking report. And then I would go back and forth, and then I would report into the mission briefings in the morning and say how much the only reason I was there was to coordinate the stops. And they would say, how long is it going to take you to load this many on? And I'd say, I don't know, probably 30 minutes. I would coordinate the time frame of the stops, and I would let them know how much available space there was at any given time because we stored things in the cargo bay sometimes for quite a long time. So that was my job for the last, probably, I want to say 2.5 years. It had to be 2 years, at least 2.5, 3 years, right in that time of my at the end of my 20.
So your job changed. Was your social life any different? Were you able to interact with people differently or have more?
I had money. So they gave me a small paycheck. Like I tell people I had the buying power of $20 to $40 a week, randomly, depending on how good they did. And so I could we were always free. We were not, it was like living in a prison, but it was a prison that you could come and go. Yeah. As long as you showed up to your post the next morning, you could go out party all night. They didn't care, because if you screwed up your job, you would be immediately disciplined. So that reality gave you freedom of they were like, fine, go. But it was like a 5-kilometer walk or 4 kilometers to the nearest town. If you couldn't afford a train ticket, you had to pay $5 for the pass. You know what I mean? For the train ticket. So
this is all on Ceres colony, still Ceres?
Yeah, inside Ceres colony. Yeah, like our barracks where they had the slave labor was down a long hallway with a train stop. Its own train. Our train was grimy. It was gross. There was no seats on it. You stood up the whole time, and it was dirty. It was filthy. But that was the slave train, and it would take us to they would go to the mines or to the hangar to the flight. But there was a long passage that you could walk down and go to the nearest little town that had a store. And it was this tiny town. And so some guys did. Sometimes on our day off, we would have a day off, all of us, and we would get downtime. And guys would be like, "We're gonna walk into town. You want to go?" And I was like, "Let me know how it is, because I'm not going. When am I gonna go there and be broke too?" And I just didn't want to walk that far.
Right.
But after I got promoted, I started getting like a profit sharing, and that was where the money came from. It was like it was a profit share. So sometimes if the ship did nothing, I got no pay, and if the ship did well, I got a bonus. Some couple times I got extra money.
Okay.
But I started to go around, and then because I was identified as a slave labor, I didn't go to public areas very much. I was trying to stay out of the main. When you think about a city, take us any small town. For anybody watching this, any small town has this main drag, a main strip that's been developed, and that's where all the fun stuff is, the good restaurants and all that. And then they have kind of a back area that's less. Every city has two sides to it. So when I went to that main drag of an area, I would get picked on or put to work. People would ask me, "Hey, you, come here, lift these up. You're going to carry these up to my room. You're going to carry these." And I had to do what I was told. I was a slave. There was everybody had authority over me. So I avoided those areas.
And you had a suit or like even a collar still, or
it changed. So it wasn't always the same exact suit. And I was not, when we woke up in the morning, we had like a pajama, like a shirt and a pants and that were not much that we wore to bed. And when you left outside, when the door opened and you left outside of the barracks, you went into the shower, or you went into a dressing room, and you just took off your clothes and hung them on a hook. There was no drawer or locker. And then at the end of it, you went through the shower, and at the end of the shower, you went to another room where you would find the hook had your number on it. We had numbers, and there would be my clothes that I was going to wear for the day. So every day it was whatever they hung for me is what I put on. Right. And that was it was identified. And sometimes it was like a light gray suit. Like when I got the promotion, my color changed to what I wore to a light gray, versus the guys were in a darker cool. They looked cooler than me. I thought the guys in the cargo bay had better clothes than I did. And we had like a Converse shoe, like a flat, very uncomfortable, cheap shoe that we had. It wasn't like a combat boot. The flight crew had boots. They had like army boots that they looked, and the what do you call it? The pants with the pockets and stuff. They had the fatigues.
Right.
The flight crew wore fatigue. We wore like a track suit thing.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So about the story, so they could identify you as the slave and keep badgering.
Okay. Yeah, so people knew exactly. They knew at first glance what I was, and they knew that they could do whatever they wanted. They could make up any story, and I would not be believed, and they would not get in trouble. So people were fully aware of this. And after that happened a few times, I quickly started to avoid. And I ended up going to the red light district a lot, where nobody cared if I was a slave or not, really, because there were a lot of slaves there. The girls were sex slaves. There were boys that were sex slaves. Like the red light district had a higher population of people that were slaves as well. So that's where I went, and I was one of them that had kind of freedom to move around. So I was privileged, and I was still around other people that were slaves. So that was my part of society I got along with.
Yeah.
Ouch.
But that's how you then met somebody there that I guess you had more of a connection with.
Made a girlfriend. That's right. And fell in love, as a 29-year-old guy would have, right. And I got to say that was probably the main motivating force between wanting to remember it. At the end of it, I didn't want to forget, because it was a big deal to me to go through the loneliness, and all the trauma, to finally have somebody that loved me. And it was a big deal. So that motivated. I did not want to forget that. To me, that was a huge achievement.
I see. And that's a good point. And so in the end, I think you mentioned that they were trying to wipe your mind. They were going to wipe your mind, and something went wrong, or you were just saying, I'm not going to forget.
I was combative. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we were all aware. Everybody was aware that when they were going to get put back, like they kind of let you know you've got a year left. They would tell you that. And it was kind of a big deal. Like I was basically dishonorably discharged. So there wasn't, but a lot of people on their last day, they would have a gathering, at the end of the day, everybody would kind of come and give them hugs and say, goodbye and have a safe, nice work or whatever. We'll miss you. Like there was a little bit of a party at the end of the day for people that were going back. And I didn't get that. They just said, I was dishonorably discharged basically for not obeying orders.
Oh, wow.
And so that was what happened at the very end of it. So it was just one guy that walked me to the hangar, to another part of the hangar, to a disc, and I walked on a series of catwalks out into a disc, and with another 7, 8 people that flew back to the moon that were going to be processed. That had, you know what I mean? Like we caught a flight on an old, grimy disc, and went back to the moon and began the process. And because they have to do it, so there are laws around the system in place, so they can't keep you longer than 20 years. It's a law. So at the end, we could be combative because there was no punishment. What are they going to do? Put you in jail? They couldn't do anything.
Mhm.
And they literally didn't know how to deal with us when, they said, hop up on the table there. And I said, no.
Mm.
And they were grays. They were grays. So they had no programming, or they had no idea what do we do? They were like, well, they were used to people hopping up on the table. So they had no protocol. I was like, no, you hop up on the table. Screw you. I want to remember. I'm going to remember this. And you're going to be in trouble. I'm going to remember all this. And you guys are jerks. I was combative through the whole thing. So they had to coax me. They called security and they did coax me. They said, look, you got to do this. Otherwise, we're going to have to put you under, and you're going to do it anyway. So like, I don't know, there were several different things that they talked me into cooperating, but for the most part, I was combative.
Huh. Yeah, there had to be a reason why you remembered, and you remembered when you did, because I think a lot of what's happened came out in the right way, in the right sequence, that you could prove that this is real. And I think that's what's so pivotal about it. You were the first to come out and really talk about it.
But a lot of it, and the Dawn probe, when I watched it, it jogged my memory. Like I was going through the process of remembering back then. Like I had the memories, and the Dawn probe was getting to Ceres, and I went, oh wow, that's it. Like it jogged my memory. So it was a perfect timing thing. And I am writing another book, and I'm just gonna, every time I talk about the second book, I'm gonna apologize because I know that a lot of it's not believable because there's not a lot of proof about the second book.
Okay.
And it's time from up there. It's more of a spiritual thing, but I'm trying to point out things that I've never talked about that don't make sense. I'm trying to make them make a little bit more sense. And I believe that there were other beings that were helping me remember. And I'm trying to explain that story of how that originated, how that whole story of contact originated with another being that I think has been looking out for me the whole time.
Wow.
Okay. Very cool.
That's the second book. That's basically the gist of it.
Yeah, we look forward to that. I think that's crucial. I mean, because that's more of a even more. Well, this is as personal as you get with your story, but
it's a diary, yeah.
But on another level, that would be important, because I think we are guided and we are protected. I mean, I always believe that. I mean, with the crazy world we live in, and for you to still be alive, Tony, and share this, there's a reason for that. There has to be.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that it's comforting to think that you're not following a destiny. Like it's comforting to think that your life is totally random. You can get up today and do what you're going to do, go to work, and it's random and it's simple and it's just not important on any other level, that there's no destiny to fulfill. That's a comforting kind of a blissful ignorance. But when things start to shape up in your life where you go, why did this happen? Like when you start really thinking, like, why does this keep happening to me? Everybody has a purpose. And when you start being corralled into your purpose of life, then you have to stop and think that the universe we live in is a lot more guided than we'd like to believe, that your life has a lot more guidance and you've actually got work to do on a certain level, that it's not comforting. Put it that way. It's alarming. It's alarming to think like that, but it's the truth. And I think we all have it. I think we all have something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. Oh man. I was gonna say a couple, what other thing that sticks out in my mind just through this whole story. And I just went blank. But
Oh,
no, but it's I know we're going to get close to the end here, but it's such an amazing story. People really have to read this book to really feel. I mean, you put us through a roller coaster, that's for sure. And I mean, it's amazing. It's heartbreaking. It really is that this has been done to so many people, and that we as a human race really have this behind us as part of our history. But we can't ignore it, because if we ignore it, it's not going to ever get better, and it's going to continue to happen. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think our own history is very sanitized, and people don't really give credence to a lot of the terrible things that happened in our own everyday history that's totally widely accepted.
Right.
Like if you think about what just happened in Europe last week, that is going on still today, but it's, you think about the last few months in Europe,
Yeah.
and you can take a look at my story, you go, man, it's heartbreaking and terrible that people treats people so bad. It's like, what do you think's been going on in a war zone
Yeah.
across Europe? People are being very badly abused, and there are children, women and children, thankfully a lot of them got out, I hope, but they're into what arms waiting for them. When the women and children evacuated, where did they evacuate to? You know what I'm saying? Like what? And I'm just speculating, but what I'm saying is, you look at my book, and so a lot of people are very shocked by the candidness of the account, the abuse and the torture that I went through. They're shocked, but really, I'm more shocked at the fact that they're unaware that it happens every day around us. That I said that in my presentation, like 6 out of 1,000 people on this planet are slaves currently. Like slavery is currently going on. I forget the number, it's in the slideshow, 40 million, 50 million slaves, people that live in slavery today, right now, all over the world. And it's not one race or color or ethnic group, it's everywhere. And there's a great deal in the United States, 600,000 or something like that, inside the United States, of people that are being used for slavery. And the bulk of that is sex trafficking slavery. They're slaves. They get told what to do. They have no human rights. They're barely kept alive. They get discarded and murdered and discarded when they're inconvenient, when they're no longer good at their job. And they have no human rights whatsoever. They are owned. And this is going on right now. So when people are like shocked, like, man, your account is so shocking, I'm thinking you should be shocked that you don't believe that that my account is actually watery compared to what's really going on down the street from us. That's the reality. People think that they know everything because it would be on the news, and and I'm gonna stop right there. I'll stop right there.
No, we get it. And go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, what was the time frame that you left, and then when your 20 years would have been up? What year was that, and then coming back?
So this is a little complicated, and I'll say it like this: that the best I can tell is it was right in 2000, in the April of 2000. So exactly 2 years of it. So because of the missions where I was leaving, and I did the math on this, and it comes out to about 8 years at 5.4 days a week of knocking off 8 hours. If you knock 8 off, that it adds up to 2 years. And that's about right. So all those missions where I lived a day, I lived 8 hours, but then we went back in time and got back right when we left. That if you add that up, that's about 2 years. So the actual timeline was 1982 till 2000, so 18 years. But I was gone 20 years because all those ships, because each of those days I was on the ship going back and forth. That works out. It's hard. I don't just volunteer this all the time, because you really lose people talking about the time travel aspect. People just hard to get your head around. But when I look back at when I woke up out, there was an instance in my life where I knew it was over, and the other me died, basically. And in my regular life, I knew it, and so I remember that, and it all worked out. It all works out. But it was like 82 till 2000.
Okay. So you think about that time frame, 82. I mean, there were slaves in space at that time. I mean, they were still. I mean, they had to be on Earth as well. So this has been ongoing for so long under the no one knows about it in the mainstream media, and no one ever talks about it. It's a sad truth.
So the Ceres colony morally justified slavery by saying that we were criminals. That they were taking people from the criminal population. And I thought, when I remember that, I went, And I looked up the 13th Amendment. I thought, well, what are the laws on slavery in the United States? And the Constitution, they rewrote the 13th Amendment and it says, no person shall be made a slave unless they've committed a crime. So
Wow.
it's perfectly legal. So it's perfectly legal. And then now let's just coincidentally, and this is just a big coincidence, and I'll just leave this right here, but we also have the highest prison population in the world. People are going to prison, and the prisons are privately owned by corporations. They're not owned by the United States. They're owned by private corporations. They're outsourced to colonies. So someone can go to prison and be taken into a 20 and back and go out there and be slave labor and put back and be screwed up in the head, and they blame it on the prison. And there's no, and it's perfectly legal in our constitutional, like in the United States. So there's infrastructure and labor that could be accessed in such a way. So that's how they morally justified it, that they were saying that they were taking criminals for that. And the shoe fits. And the shoe fits when you look at our prison system right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't see them trying to fix that system, and they want to keep it broken, and they want to keep that resource available. Seems like
most, they want you to believe that the most expensive thing for a corporation in the world today, they always want to complain and say, our biggest expense is taxes. And that's a bunch of horseshit. The biggest expense is labor for every the companies that are immediately, software companies don't have a ton of labor or overhead, so they have billions of dollars immediately. But for when you look at Walmart or any kind of manufacturer, General Motors, the biggest expense is labor across the board. That's just it. And so for them to steal a slave labor force to build colonies out into the solar system, this is like absolutely makes perfect sense. It's logical as can be.
And you brought up a good point at the conference and other times, is that robots and androids or whatever, I mean, they can only do so much. Like, to have a body with a consciousness that says, I need to do this, and I can, I basically can take care of myself. I don't break down as often. It's just less maintenance. It's easier to control too, on the way, and to make it work.
Fully programmable, energy efficient, more energy efficient than any machine could ever be. Very little. They have free food now. They replicate the food. Fully programmable, and can adapt to the situation. So while you're mining and then you poke a hole and water comes in, machines aren't going to go and fix the water, grab a bucket and shoveling. People will start working the problem. People can think on their own. So we are very talented, and manual labor is tough to beat, no matter how advanced the robot can be.
Right. And so one other part about the technology, like you believe, was it true that you were a clone? They called you all clones. So it was a program, right?
So number one, I think it was a clone. So I think they cloned me, and that way there were two of me at the same time. So people always go, where were your parents? You were gone for 20 years, and they put you back. What about your parents? Why didn't they call the cops? I was back.
Yeah.
They put me back a few minutes later, but I think they cloned me, and they took half of my consciousness, consciousness is probably something that is a beam that gets to us rather than something that's in us and comes out. So they just intercepted the beam and split it in two, and my life followed suit. So I was less smart and less emotionally sound the whole time. And then when it ended, it was like I got it all back together. Like I woke up one day and I went, whoa, I went, wow. And I kind of got my life back together. So it was like the beam came back when it was over. And I found that with other people that I've worked with too, many hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people that I've talked to, they have the same kind of experience at the end of 20 years.
Wow.
So I believe it was a clone, and that explains the time. It just answers the questions. And then the memories, like when they took me, I had no memory of when I woke up in the 20 years in the clone body. I had no memory of mom and dad in Michigan. Then I had 20 years. And then when they put me back in my body, I had my memories back. So they didn't take my memories out and then reprogram them somehow. They were local in that body. And those 20 years were gone now, the memories. So that makes it all fits. So I don't know for sure. I could be totally wrong, to be honest with you. I mean, they didn't brief me on what was going on, but it just makes sense that was part of the tech.
That totally makes sense. And and that makes sense why you were kind of more obedient, less like emotionally charged, or willing to, or trying to get freed all the time. You were literally kind of more docile in a way, it seemed. And I think the cloning that's taking place on Earth, that we can kind of speculate is happening, you see those remnants of that probably.
I was shocked when they immediately banned human cloning, right? Like it took them a matter of 3 days after cloning. They announced that cloning was possible. They said, oh, it's banned. Human cloning is banned. And so that was a little shocking to me that they did that. You would think that they would,
Hmm.
for
Oh yeah.
medical reasons, pursue that. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
whatever. There's huge reasons. I get it for both ways. It's like it's a profound question for human cloning. When we talk about how profound it is, even to talk about abortion, how loaded the abortion topic is.
Right.
Imagine cloning a kid. So
Yeah.
it's a tough subject.
Yeah. Like all of your subjects are pretty hard to tough, but it's important. It's definitely important. And the last thing I remember you really saying to me in the conference, and you mentioned something about this stuff that happens, this dark stuff that happens. It's like magic almost, but like these types of even sacrifices and things that happen, it's used more as a technology than anything. If you look at it that way, right?
Right. I
That's
spoke a little bit about it, and a lot of people. When I talk about what I witnessed, so when I was in Seattle, the person that owned me was a practicing Satanist. So, and I was witness to some very dark rituals that they did. And looking back on it and researching it, so when I got my memories back, I started thinking, why do people do this? Why do they sacrifice people? They murder people. And when you look at it, ritual human sacrifice was not something that was uncommon in the
right.
world.
Right.
For not long ago, the whole planet did it everywhere. The Mississippi Indians, the Aztecs, the Scottish people, the pagans, all through the Middle East, the Carthage, the Romans banned it, but not really. It
Right.
wasn't until, and then all through Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, China, Mongolia, they all practiced ritual human sacrifice at one point. And it was, in fact, Christianity that stomped it out. The whole communion. They said, "What do we do when you're dead, Jesus? Are we going to eat you?" That was the question at the Last Supper. Do we eat you? And he said, no. He got rid of ritual human sacrifice, and that the Last Supper literally set and the the Catholic Church took over and proliferated. And that's really what they did, is they got rid of ritual human sacrifice. And so I look at it as more of a technology. They were aware of a glitch when people die. Like I think a lot of people watching have a story of witnessing somebody die either in the hospital room, and they start seeing people. Oh, grandma's here. There's all kinds of weird stories around when somebody dies. There's a glitch in the hologram in time space. There's a glitch when a human passes. It's different than an animal.
Yeah.
When an animal dies, it's not the same. But I've witnessed deaths where the wind picked up and the person died. It wasn't a windy day; it was a muggy day. Like this huge effect, and weird, and then the wind died down, and then
Right.
a half hour later, it happened again, and somebody else died. And I witnessed that. There's a glitch, and I think they have a technology of accessing the other side during that time, and that's why they do that. And ancient man discovered it accidentally, and it's a technology. It's that simple. And
Right.
so they've been using that to maintain an advantage and stay in control, which is logical.
Wow. And that's important for people to know that that's been happening behind the scenes. It has not gone away. If we think that everything's rosy on the surface, as
They
rosy as
essentially, yeah, they've essentially got rid of it and put it in their back pocket for them to use in secret. And then,
yeah.
I can speak out about it. You can go and research. There's a lot. You go, where do they get these people from? Where do they get the kids from? The war zones, for one, and the system to build. There's a system in place for orphan kids. Nobody knows where they go. Nobody knows what happens to kids. Millions of kids.
Right. Right.
So I've got to get rolling, guys.
Yeah, no, I'll let you go.
This alarm go off.
Yeah, definitely. That was it. You covered everything, and it was a great topic and great show of all. One of our best shows probably for what we've been doing and disclosing, and so important, like we said, and so important to now look at what you're doing to try to help the situation, make it better, and hopefully with the kids.
I think the future is bright, and I think people talking and connecting and people meeting each other and interweaving and just getting away from the media and the people that want to just feed you and make you not think, like us talking with each other. I think that's really what's changing the world. And as it grows and continues, the world is just going to get better and better. So I'm an optimist always.
Yeah, I
That's
love that. Building a sense of community with people who are like-minded and ready for a change, ready for something different.
And
I
just
think
make it
that's,
happen. That's just it. That's got to do it yourself. Uh,
Thank you so much.
Dr.
yeah,
Northrup said, God moves mountains, bring a shovel.
yeah,
Yeah, there we
perfect.
go.
Yep.
I like that. I like that.
All
All
right.
right.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Tony, thank you for your time. Really appreciate you being here. This has been amazing, like my brother said, and we're just really blessed to have you here and grateful. So thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks. Anytime, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Take care.